And the next item on tonight's agenda is D3, ZC 2021-01. This is the public hearing, and I'm opening the public hearing for case ZC 2021-01. Clayton Comstock is going to introduce the item. Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commission. Item D3 on our agenda, as you mentioned, is ZC 2021-01. It's a zoning change request from agricultural to RPD, residential plan development. This is on 3.5 acres located at 8337 Davis Boulevard. That's located at the southwest quadrant of North Tarrant Parkway and Davis Boulevard. You can see the star there just to the south of the commercial shopping center that includes the Alcatraz escape room, trampoline park, Sonic, coffee shop, and other uses. And then to the west is the Saddlebrook Estates residential neighborhood. Just across Davis Boulevard, you see the driveway there for the Alamo Draft House. Just an announcement, the Alamo Draft House is still planning to open coming up in July. Just zooming in a little bit more, a couple of streets will be referenced this evening through the various presentations. One is Clara Drive. You can see that at the very end of Saddlebrook Drive, Clara Drive, and Bridle Path Lane. One thing of note is that when Saddlebrook Estates was platted and planned in 2013, because there are more than 30 residential units within Saddlebrook Estates, some sort of future access needed to be planned for access out to Davis Boulevard or some other future access for emergency service vehicles. So that's why Clara Drive and Bridle Path Lane were stubbed to the east. It's for the future plan of connecting to Davis Boulevard, be it through commercial uses or additional residential uses. The use of the property to the east, or this property before this evening, was not discussed. It was just simply that access out to Davis Boulevard was going to be needed. A number of photos of the property. This is a view from the east side of Davis looking across at the property. Of course, it's 3.5 acres at the back of the property, so you can see Clara Drive and Saddlebrook Estates homes back there. And then the north property line, you can see the tree line there covering the commercial shopping center. This is a bit further north on Davis Boulevard, looking across Davis directly west. There is an existing home on the property today, and the proposed development actually does not include that home as part of their proposal. This is a view internal to the commercial shopping center to the north, looking back to the south. I show this because the height of the building, approximately at 45 feet at its roof peak, would be seen from this parking lot looking to the south. A view of the southern property line of the commercial shopping center. This would also be the north property line of the subject tract. Looking at the tree cover there. We'll go into more detail later, but this existing tree cover will mostly need to come out because of grading along the property line, although they do come in with additional landscaping along this property line. And one of the few trees that is proposed to be saved is this one here at the corner, the northwest corner of the subject property, this being the southwest corner of the commercial shopping center. This is a view interior to Saddlebrook Estates, looking to the east down Clara Drive. So this is where a proposed emergency access connection would be, and it would be a gated connection. We'll go into more detail later through the presentation. Just getting closer to that access connection. Of course, all of these photos will be available to reference back to during either the applicant's presentation or staff's second presentation. There's a existing concrete drainage flume on the east side of Saddlebrook Estates. All of the drainage from or most of the drainage from the subject property would connect into the existing infrastructure of Saddlebrook Estates to flow further west into the channelized area for Bear Creek. Also of note on this western property line is the fence. We'll go, again, more detail later in the presentation, but this 6-foot wood fence would be replaced with a 8-foot tall masonry screening wall. Another photo of that fence line looking north. This is at the end of Clara Drive. And then pivoting directly east. You can see the Alamo Draft House in the background. So you can see the elevation change where Davis Boulevard is higher in elevation than the subject property, and then Saddlebrook Estates is lower than the subject property. The future land use plan does recommend retail commercial, and it has recommended retail commercial for a number of land use plans, the latest one being 2012, before the current Vision 2030 future land use plan that was adopted in 2019. This provides sites for community and regional shopping centers, commercial establishments, and employment centers, typically located on major thoroughfares at key intersections. Again, this is part of a larger 8.3 acre tract that is all planned for retail commercial. And we'll get in more detail on that later in the presentation. The existing zoning is agricultural, and what's being proposed here this evening by the applicant is a residential planned development for a senior independent living facility, independent living apartment development. With that, I'm going to turn over to the applicants, Brian Scott and others I know are presenting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn over to them, and I'll be back up afterwards with DRC presentation and recommendation.
Thank you, Clayton. If you guys would give your names and addresses at the microphone, that would be a help.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm Shane Wright. I'm one of the principals with Real Estate Equities. Address is 1400 Corporate Center Curve, Suite 100, Eagan, Minnesota, 55121. And then we've got Justin Lansdowne from McAdams. We also have Brian Scott, who is our direct project manager for this site. And I'm one of the principals with Real Estate Equities. We have 3 owners, and I'm going to do a quick history. And this is ownership housing for seniors. So I'm going to do a quick history on the product type because it is unique here to Texas. In fact, to my knowledge, this is going to be the first senior cooperative in the state of Texas. So I'd like to give you a little bit of background on that. We also had a neighborhood meeting on April 7th. We front and center, our goal here is to be a phenomenal neighbor. That's our goal. We believe we're accomplishing that. We want to go through each of the concerns with the neighbors and share how we have solutions for each of those. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump right in, if that's okay.
Sure.
We're going to just do a quick introduction into us and what the co-op model is. Our zoning request and details, and we can reference back pictures. I've got some other images that we can reference back if there's questions. Building and site plan details, addressing all concerns with solutions. That's our goal here tonight, is to address all the concerns. And then we want to demonstrate to you all how this project is needed. We believe firmly this is the best option for the site, the city, and the neighborhood long term. So another goal of ours is to demonstrate that to you tonight. And then if there's any questions at the end, if there's something new that comes up, I'd love the opportunity to answer it. So at the end, if there's additional questions and I'm able to, I'd love to come back up and answer those. So our company's been in business since 1972. I actually went to college here. I graduated from here, grew up in Kansas, went to Texas Tech University, lived in Dallas for a while, lived in Fort Worth for a while, fell in love with a girl and moved to Minnesota. So we're a Minnesota-based company. We've been there since 1972. I've been with the company 18 years. We have about 9,000 homes we've developed in that time frame. We did not start doing cooperatives until 18 years ago. And then that's our sole business now. All we do is senior housing cooperatives. We have 40 village cooperatives that are, well, actually 41 now. We're about to announce our 41st that are open, under construction, or being planned. We've completed a little over $400 million in cooperative development. We just want people to know this is our core business. This is our specialty. There are 3 or 4 developers in the country who do co-ops. They're all out of Minnesota. This is actually a little dated. We actually are opening our 31st community tomorrow in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And then we have 10 more that are proposed or under construction right now. We're in 10 different states. If anybody has questions about why we go, where we go, I'm happy to explain, but I'll put it to you this way. This area here, we're choosing North Richland Hills for our first community in Texas and in DFW for a lot of reasons. We love this community, but it also probably ranks in the top half or top 1% of 2,000 cities that we've looked at across the United States for a need for our type of housing. I'll elaborate on that a little bit more here in just a minute. So senior cooperatives it's not a new concept. It's just predominantly been in the upper Midwest. So they've been around since the 1970s. There's 130 in the country. There's never been one that's defaulted or failed. They're very conservatively set up. We're now up to, I believe it's actually now 85 co-ops in Minnesota. So Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul is about 3.5 million people, depending on how far out you measure. There's 55 senior co-ops just in the Twin Cities alone. So it's the common option for retirees, and the reason is because people own them, and people want to own where they live in Minnesota and the upper Midwest in retirement. So the cooperative owners enjoy a lot of amenities you won't typically find in a lot of housing options. It's because of the ownership structure, so it kind of takes the best of renting and the best of owning and combines it together. So each member owns a share in the cooperative. So we're only doing 55 homes, which is a real small project. So we sell 55 shares. Cooperative owns everything. Everything's in the title and the name of the cooperative. Cooperative pays all the operating expenses to run this community. It's run by the residents. They have their own board of directors. Board of directors manages all the bylaws we set up. The structure of the bylaws here are the exact same with the state added laws as what we have in Puyallup, Washington, Fort Collins, Colorado, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you name, wherever we're at, Ames, Iowa, the structure of the bylaws is the same. We actually go to every single board meeting they have. We attend 400 plus, maybe 500 board meetings a year. So we're there with their board to train and guide them on how they operate their community. So every time they have a question, we're right there with them on a monthly basis for them to be able to operate their community. So I think it's important. One of the biggest efforts we put into is when we go before a public council, planning commission, is educating people. As we're very different from a traditional senior housing. Everybody likes to lump us in, and you don't typically have a zoning for senior co-ops. We get thrown into the apartment mode. I understand that, but we want you to understand, you can be 55 or you can be 110, you're still a senior. It just doesn't mean your housing needs are the same. So the people who are living in our communities, they're active, independent, they're younger, retirees. They want to own and have control. That's super important to them. They want to have a spacious home because they're planning, most of them are planning to be their last move. So since they're younger, they're planning to be there a long time. So they want to have a spacious home, near a lot of amenities, and have a lot of amenities in the community where they're going to stay forever. They want to free themselves from home maintenance and operations. That's become a burden, it's become a risk, and they're ready to be done with it. I mean, we had no idea that when we would come to North Richland Hills, you would have the home appreciation you're seeing here. That's not why we're here. We're here because seniors want to rid themselves from the home maintenance and the operations. But our owners do not need or want a healthcare model. They don't want to be in a setting that provides healthcare. They command a great location. They want to be near where they live right now, near to their church, the same grocery store, the same doctors that they go to. They don't want those things to change. They desire ownership, and they desire a community that's age restricted. That is something really important to them. That is actually legally aged. We can legally age discriminate. So that's important to the owners in our community. And they're looking for more or enhanced social opportunities. Many of our buyers will tell you they spend 6 to 10 days with their families over the holidays, the other 300 days out of the year or more. They're looking for that extended family. This becomes an extended family, especially since we keep the community so small. And at the end of the day, who doesn't want a great value? And our owners work hard, and they want a good value. They want to own it, and they want to be able to have it for a good value, and the co-op offers that because when the residents own it, it cuts out a lot of the additional costs that you see in traditional housing. So why are they great neighbors? I told you in the beginning we want to be a phenomenal neighbor. We will be, but here's why. They're quiet. This is a quiet community. It's not a loud community. It produces the least amount of traffic of any use you could probably come up with for this location. They're owners, so they've invested. They've put skin in the game. They're invested in their community. They want it to be nice. It's their home. Their operating budget includes reserves to continue to maintain the community long term. This is always a tough decision for cities when you're rezoning property for an apartment because what's it going to look like in 10 years? I mean, if I was you all, that's what I would be thinking about. What's this going to look like in 10 years? Well, this is a rare model where they're funding capital reserves for future capital replacements. We've never had an assessment in any of our co-ops. We've never needed one because they started the day the building opened. Funding. The owners are often volunteers in the community. Many of them on their subconscious bucket list always wanted to give back and never had the time. This is a common theme in all of our communities. They all want to give back because now they have the time to do so. They're young enough to do it and they have the energy to do it. So they give back to where they've lived for a long time. And it creates new homes without burdening the city. It creates new homes without adding a burden to public uses, and it frees up the homes where the younger generations are able to move in. And this is a really simple formula. And then traffic is always a concern with neighbors, and we had a great discussion in the neighborhood, and I don't think there's going to be a neighbor that would disagree. We will create the least amount of traffic of any use you could come up with for this site. Not only because we have such a minimal number of homes, but because there aren't kids living there. During the AM peak time, if you used an engineering traffic study, it would probably only create 9 trips during AM peak. So, and the same with PM. So it has minimal impact on the traffic there. 55 homes, they're all going to be on one level. It's a 3-story building. We use attractive details and materials on all of our communities because they're owner occupied. It's 3.5 acres plus or minus. The homes will be built over a post-tension concrete deck with 57 underground parking stalls. That's something that's very different in Texas because you have tough soil here. But it's also a tremendous amenity to the co-op owners and the neighbors because we can landscape more because we've taken basically 3/4 of an acre instead of it being parking, it's underneath. And we're able to landscape significantly more because of that. I'll just go through this real quick. 15 different styles of homes. We have 2 elevators and 2 stairwells, underground garage. We've got a utility bay in the garage, guest suites for the residents, family if they come stay and they want to host them in the guest suite. There's a large community room and a club room on the first level. It's used daily. Raised garden beds, outdoor patio and fireplace and grilling area. Reading areas, there's a shop room, fitness center. There's additional internal storage rooms in there. Every home has a storage room, but if they want additional, there's additional storage rooms in the community, inside the building. So some facts about the site. Obviously, Clayton shared with you. It's currently zoned agricultural. It'd have to be rezoned, whatever came into it. We would take up just about 3.5 acres of the 8.33 overall. The 2030 Vision Land Use Plan, which Clayton obviously was instrumental in leading that, is a plan to a guide map of a range of uses. It's obviously called out for this site to be retail commercial. Retail commercials obviously have a much higher impact on the site with higher traffic, lighting, signage, parking, much less landscaping and tighter setbacks. So I would hope to demonstrate to you that we can still keep retail commercial frontage along Davis and still have an impact with the co-op there that's going to be much less than if retail commercial went all the way through the back of the site there. The senior cooperative has the lowest possible impact on the site compared to any type of other potential uses. And then this is going to allow this area to develop with retail, commercial, and vision along Davis. This is setting this site up to be able to do that. And then when I touched on a national market study, how high this ranks, I want to put that into numbers. This is eye-popping in our world. Within a 3-mile radius of this site, there's right at just over 15,000 households that are 55 and over. That's not people, that's households within a 3-mile radius. In our world, that's a crazy number. I've only seen one other site higher, Lakewood, Colorado, 22,000 households. Short of that, we don't see those kind of numbers. We normally see 6 or 7. So I'm going to guess you're going to get a lot of other proposals in the future for senior types of uses because not only is the volume there of the households, but the number of years that people have been in those households is amazing. I've only seen rural towns in Iowa with people in their homes longer than here. We're talking 25 and 30 years is common in this area. So facts, getting into the site plan, we'll touch on landscaping. This depicts the landscaping around the site, around the building. It's significant. We're well beyond what would be required out here, and we didn't have to have Clayton tell us to do that. This is an owner-occupied community. We want to be a great neighbor. We want to have beyond any kind of buffering that would normally be considered. We want on the site. So on the north, on the west, on the east, we can get into a lot more details if you have questions because we've got McAdams here this evening, but I'll touch on some facts. So our landscape architect worked with the city's architect, Joe, I'm forgetting his last name, to come up with the appropriate mix of plantings and trees for our landscape plan. The landscape requirements for our use are 15% of the total site size. So that's about 0.517 acres. If you take 3.45 acres times 0.15, our proposal has 41% of the site landscape, which is 1.43 acres. So it works out to about 2.77 times required. And a big part of that is we build a lot of them, but also because we contain the parking beneath the building. We're enhancing landscaping buffer along the western property line. As you saw, we've got 2 rows of trees that are staggered, planted over there. If we didn't have the parking beneath, or we were a 2-story building, we would be nowhere close to these numbers. We wouldn't be able to touch these numbers because it would be spread out over the property, and there'd be less area to landscape. If we were a commercial use, it'd be challenging to meet the landscaping requirements because of parking requirements. That is kind of the challenge with commercial uses, is how do you meet parking and landscape requirements? So this is not a landscape plan. Clayton already showed a plan similarly to show you where the building sits on the property, but we wanted twofold here to show that we're sitting on 3.5 acres of 55 homes. We don't come close to covering this site. This was a perfect location for us because it gave us the opportunity to space this appropriately from the neighborhood to the west. Our building's 120 feet from the property line. It also sets this development up for future commercial uses, which typically cities are going to want to see that along a major thoroughfare like Davis. This is just detailed layout if people have questions on the site plan. This is an architectural 3D modeling of the east side, kind of near the entrance. Give you a depiction of the colors. This is a more closer up version of the entrance. So, as you can see, it's not very large. This would be from the west side. Questions we got was how much of your garage is exposed. As you can see, it's not. There's going to be a couple feet on that west side, and we're covering that all up with landscaping. That's going to be completely covered. And it's just sound design to not run the grade right to the first inch of the first floor when you have a garage underneath. We came in and we told Clayton right away we would put up a wall. We said we'll put up a 6-foot high masonry wall, replace the fence that's out there now. After discussion with the neighborhood, we said we're fine going higher. We'll go to 8 feet, which is 2 foot higher than what's out there right now. So we're totally fine with that, and I think that adds to both of us. Just a couple pictures from the insides of homes. Not that you like these colors, but just they vary quite a bit. People are picking their finishes as owners, so they get that say in the final finishes for the inside. The homes average about 1,350 square feet, so they're large because that's where they're going to stay permanently. So it's not an apartment style of design or project. Every home has everything they would need: appliances, laundry rooms, decks for every home. The cost of the project, the cost of each home, they buy a share and then they pay their portion of the expenses. So those range depending on where their home is and the size of it in the building. Probably average around $200,000+ for a share, and their monthly fees range about $2,000 a month. So significantly higher and nicer than a $200,000 home. It's The 200,000 only covers a portion of the cost to develop this project. So they have an upfront share, and then they pay their portion of the expenses.
And those are taxes figured into those monthly expenses too.
Taxes are included, yeah.
So the 2,000 covers the annual tax bill per share.
Yeah, so the co-op will get one real estate tax bill, and then it's split up between the 55 homes, and it's included in that monthly expense. So the monthly expenses pay for the operational budget on an annual basis. It's about 35 line items, including the real estate taxes. And includes operations, reserves, the staff, property taxes, the master mortgage that's used to build it with their shares. The monthly fees in co-ops stay very stable and more flat long term because they're only paying actual expenses. So I get asked, the most common question I get, how much are you going to raise our monthly fees? I get that all the time. We can't raise them because we don't own this. It's yours. So if you take the long-term average of all of our co-ops, it's less than 1% a year. The residents decide to raise their monthly fees. It's about 0.8% is it, because they're only paying actual expenses and the majority of their budget is fixed. So there isn't a third-party owner that's raising them, so they stay a lot more flat. Our oldest co-op, Fergus Falls, Minnesota, it's 16 and a half years old, has never changed its monthly fees. Probably has a 10 to 12-year wait list to move into it. Little small town, definitely don't want to go there in the winter, but it's got a wait list forever. And it's partially because they've never raised their monthly fees.
When somebody sells a share or a unit, I mean, is it market-based?
So the shares appreciate at a simple 3% each year that they live there. So what it does is it gives the original investor that's living there a return, and it keeps it affordable for the next buyer. So it's one of the reasons every one of our open communities has a wait list. All 31 as of tomorrow have wait lists to move in. So when they want to move, they'll notify the co-op that they wish to move. Now, if they have a 10-year wait list, could they move their appreciation higher than 3%? It's up to them. But we set it up for what we know works because we've seen the early 80s, we've seen the mid-90s, we've seen 2001, 2008. You know, and there's another one coming here at some point where the market's going to correct. So we don't say this is a market rate cooperative where you can just chase the market. We want to keep it because at a lot of our residents' ages, they're not looking for real estate risk. They want a home to live. So we set the bylaws up 3% appreciation each year annually on the share. And if they want to change it after long term, it's up to them if they want to do that. So we attract a lot of number crunchers into our communities. I mean, we started doing these with farmers. Farmers don't move off the farm unless their wife tells them they're moving. And then their wife usually tells them they're moving off the farm. And so to justify it, say, well, this has to make financial sense for us. So at the end of the day, most people will end up living in the co-op for very close or less than what it costs them to live in their house long term. Most people don't believe that. But when you go a true apples to apples comparison, the reason we're so popular is because they can live there long term for about the same costs. So, and the reasons, not a lot of people use the tax write-offs because everybody takes a standard deduction. But the board controls the expenses very closely, so they're not having surprise increases. We've never had an assessment. They're freeing up the equity from their house. Who knew houses were going to go up this much? But the cost of a share is less than half of the average house in the area. So they have a big chunk of equity that they're putting somewhere to get dividends. And they're getting that chunk of dividend back monthly or quarterly. And then there's no more unexpected expenses or repair bills for a home anymore.
We have a question here from
Sure.
John, so.
Yes, sir. If you are, is the individual listed as an owner of his unit
Have a share certificate as an owner in the co-op.
for tax purposes and all that? As a senior, you know, your taxes freeze, and you have homestead exemptions. Now, how do those play in? Can you still get those?
So the homestead exemptions do pass along as an owner in the co-op. As far as your state laws on freezing taxes for seniors, that is something we need to explore because that's for 65 and over.
Right.
And we need to ask the assessor if they'll do that for our co-op as well. So we intend to do that.
Now, of course, those would be individual units. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
I just-
We haven't had a confirmed answer to that yet, but we're pursuing it.
I just wanted to bring that up so you're aware of that, and the homestead exemption, because that's another tax benefit.
Yeah, so we have homestead exemptions in Minnesota and Iowa and Wisconsin, and I think we have maybe in Kansas as well, and very used to dealing with the homestead exemption in other states, and yours is similar to what we're used to seeing. So thanks for pointing that out, and we definitely, any help we can get with this freezing of the taxes, I'm all ears. Yes?
I got a question. So you mentioned maintenance. Is that outsourced or is it like a staff-based?
So we have a staff that works there that will handle day-to-day operations and maintenance. If they have to hire it out, they'll hire out a subcontractor to fix it. So if they need to replace a fridge, the co-op covers the cost of that. It's included in your ownership costs. So if the maintenance person is typically going to just call the vendor and have them drop off a new fridge and dispose of the one that's there. If they need to replace a furnace, it's all included. So they would call the HVAC person that they've chosen, and they would come and replace it. Every home has its own HVAC, so it makes it really simple when you need to do that. But it just depends on what the maintenance task is.
Is this a good spot in your presentation to ask questions about co-op?
Sure.
And then later on, ask questions about site plan?
Yes.
That way we can,
Yeah, absolutely. If
explore
you want
the
to ask
whole
some more
co-op
questions
thing.
about the co-op, I'd be happy to answer those.
because normally we wait till the end of the presentation, but yours is probably pretty long, and we're not familiar with this kind of land use.
Yeah, and I apologize for being lengthy, but when you're the out-of-state developer, I think it's important you all understand our product type.
Gregory, did you have a?
Yeah, I had two more.
Sure.
How does this differ from like a condo type scenario where you own the airspace and not the actual building?
Yeah, so how does it differ from a condo? So condo is a real estate transaction. Condos are hard to legally age restrict. When you go to sell your condo, it's up to you. You're going to hire your own professional to sell it. Any maintenance obligations are up to you. The condo is typically less community areas, so it's less driven around community. And I know from working with our buyers in the past, there is that fear, can I exit out of it on a condo? What do I got to do to sell this and go through the process and the cost of doing that? Whereas the co-op to transfer ownership is much simpler. We maintain wait lists at the communities. They do continued marketing the whole time you're living there, which you don't do in a condo. You don't market it till it's actually for sale. But a condo is real estate, and this is an investment in a cooperative corporation.
So, I mean, you mentioned that there's always a wait list, or in your experience, there's always been a wait list. What happens if there isn't?
If there's not a wait list, we're pushing them to do functions to grow their wait list. So we're helping them with continued marketing, with coaching them on what you do to grow a wait list. It's actually not that hard. 55 homes in an area when you have this many seniors, it's not that hard. And word of mouth travels fast. 30% of this building, we're probably 60 to 65% sold right now. We're nowhere near construction. We don't even have our approvals yet.
65% sold in this project. I remember when you presented before, you had a couple of pre-sales that would speak in favor of you, so.
And we do tonight as well. Yeah, we definitely do tonight as well.
Okay, my last question is there anything in the bylaws that prevents sublet? Like if
Yeah, you cannot sublease without consent of the board, and they don't allow it unless it's temporary. Say you wouldn't do it here, but up north, a lot of people will come down here for the winter. And so if they leave for the winter, and our winters are forever, they leave for 6 months, they might lease it to their sister to live there for the 6 months while they're gone. That's something we have seen. But there are no VRBOs allowed. There is no subleasing and then moving in 2 years later. We have investors call us all the time to buy homes. It's a very fast no. There is no subleasing without consent. It says it explicitly in the bylaws.
thank you.
Any others?
Do you, I think when you presented previously on the previous case, you said that you guys stay on and that you basically manage every project you've built. Are you still, is that still the case?
Yeah, we'll have a management contract with this. When we started doing these 18 years ago, I was just a young kid. And I remember the meeting we had specifically to say, are we going to manage them or not? Because management is a challenging business. And we decided at that time right away with ease that we were going to manage. Number one is we didn't want to sell it just once. We wanted to see the second, third, fourth generation buyers. We didn't want to sell it. All right, good luck to y'all, and move on. And number two is we take the collective knowledge of all the co-ops that we operate and manage, and share that with everybody else. So when we open this community, if you'll allow us to, they'll ask us questions. Well, what do you do when your roof gets hit with hail? We say, well, this is the steps. This is the insurance person you should call that we use on every co-op in Colorado. We have 10 out in Colorado, and they get hit with hail all the time. What would we do if we have this person that is being difficult? Well, this is how you do it. This is how you walk through the steps. I think that's why I know that's one of the reasons they've been really successful, is because the developers typically will stick with them.
It's kind of like a third-party HOA management company.
Yeah, well, and the other reason is the lender. If the lender for the project, there's a lender to build this with their shares, they're going to require an experienced co-op management company to stick with the project if they're going to invest in it. So that's the other thing. We didn't want to third party it out and have the transition between. We thought it was better to keep it in-house. And it's worked. We didn't ever envision we'd be in Texas, but we're glad we do now because we are here.
Previously on your map, the previous case, you didn't have any projects in Texas, or was it DFW? And now it looks like there's two on your map existing.
So we have this one proposed, and we're approved for a project in Allen, Texas.
Allen?
Yeah, we chose this one first. When we go into a market, we don't flood a market. We carefully select where we're going. And we're not a huge company. We're 125 employees, so we pick 4 or 5 projects a year. That's it.
How many units was the one in Allen?
It is 61.
61. Is it a similar situation on a major arterial?
Yeah, it's not on a major arterial, but it's close. It's 4 stories. It's a flat roof, different architectural design than this one, but similar common areas, similar price point.
Is it further along than this one?
No, this one is approved, and we launched. Or if this one was approved, this one would be further along because we launched this one first. We've taken through the preliminary steps with the lender on this one. Allen is a newer project. They had a really short public hearing process, and we were an approved use to begin with. So that's why it has its approvals.
Does your company, do y'all have any seats on the board, or are those all shareholder seats?
100% residents are the shareholder or the board.
And you are their third-party manager. They hire you basically, or continue.
Yeah, they can get rid of us too. But we're the initial management company for definitely the first few years, and pretty much everyone always wants us to stay with them because we share the knowledge from all the other co-ops. And the sales and marketing is a big thing. I mean, we get hammered on our website daily, and that helps other buildings keep their wait list growing.
Can they change the bylaws and CCRs without approval from their lender?
To change the bylaws requires lender approval. There can be operational changes like we're going to allow you to have only 1 dog instead of 2. They don't need lender approval for that. But the actual physical bylaws, they would need lender approval to change those. They wouldn't need ours though. We would guide them if they said, hey, we would like to do this. We've had this situation come up. We'd walk them through. Here's the steps you would go through.
So you've got 60 of these that you've done in the past, or any of them?
41.
41.
We're about to announce our 41st.
Are any of them paid off?
This is what they do. So they pay them down for 7, 8, 9 years, and then just mathematically they refi. They end up refining and taking back the savings. I mean,
just because interest rates have been going
well,
down.
so if the average length of time someone stays there is probably in the range of 10 years, somewhere in that range. And so, I mean, we have people who move in and say they're going to live there 30 years. But after 7, 8, 9 years, when you have 70% of the original residents that are still living there, they say, well, why don't we refi and take back the savings? Not all of them do that, but if they took it through full amortization, yeah, they would drop their
they
monthlies.
could get a new appraisal and take back the appreciated savings.
We just helped 18 co-ops refinance. because of rates this year.
It's very similar to refinancing your house. So.
Yeah, it's no different. They just needed the guidance on it, and we just walked them through how to do 18.
This one's kind of site plan related, but I was just curious, how much more does it cost per parking space to park cars beneath a building versus on the surface?
That's an interesting exercise. It's not as much as you think. The extra land, it's not offsetting. It's a little bit more. I would put it in the range of $5,000 to $8,000 more per parking space to do it underground, and it ranges based on land prices.
Okay, but just construction costs, taking the land out of it.
Well, so construction costs is definitely quite a bit more to do it. But if we didn't have it, we would have to buy more land. We would have to get a larger parcel. We would have to get obviously more engineering on it, which isn't insignificant. So the difference between that and doing it the way we do it is what I'm saying is probably ends up $5,000 to $8,000 more a stall. But the amenity of having it, if you're walking through the shoes of your typical 73-year-old, security is a huge thing. Not only I'm not talking even just about crime, pulling into a garage and then that door's closed, and then mobility challenges as you age, being able to take the elevator right up to your home, it's a huge peace of mind for them. Not just the security of pulling in and not having someone out in the parking lot and you're scared about that, but mobility and challenges that way, and weather. Yours is heat, ours is cold, Seattle's rain. But pulling in out of the weather is a big one too. So it's just unusual here, and you have crazy soils here that aren't fun to work with, but that's okay. The engineers we're challenging them with this.
Any other questions on the co-op? Gregory and then Greg? Okay.
You've mentioned several times, we help them do it. We help them do it. Why would anybody want to be on the board of one of these? Because it seems like they're doing a lot of work.
Great question. Why would anybody want to be on the board? People are so used to HOAs that they can't, like Colorado, we went out there, no one could understand. Why would anybody want to be on a board? HOAs a lot of times are passive aggressive because you don't see your neighbors every time. So if there's an HOA meeting, people show up and they bitch. In this building, they see each other daily. So there's that inherent, like, peer. You see your peers every day. And because they've invested and they have the time because they're retired, there is a lot of pride. We don't have a shortage of people wanting to run on the board. In fact, probably have too many because they want to be involved. They have the time. They're young enough, too, and they have the energy. And many of them are not that far out of their careers where they're like, hey, I've got the time to do this right now. So we haven't had that issue.
And is there a process they roll through on the board?
Yeah, so we have 5 people on the board. We walk them through the election process. There's one up for renewal every year. President, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and at-large member. 5 highest vote receivers for the initial board are the initial board, and then we walk through with them. What term do you want to serve? 1, 2, or 3 year? Typically, the first president always wants to do a 1-year term to test it out, and then when they get in. I don't actually think it's quite as much work as you would think for the right personality. If you have somebody that likes to control everything, yeah, they're going to work themselves like crazy. If you have somebody that's pretty easygoing, has been a leader, people like them, they're a good leader, it's not going to be that much work. Especially since you have the staff that's the staff's doing all the accounting. The maintenance is hiring out all the maintenance. The cleaning person's cleaning all the common areas. So those things are set up ahead of time.
So the financial aspect y'all oversee as the consultants, or?
Yeah, we help them. We don't do it, but we help them get their third-party annual audits set up. We give them all their 1098s every year. So we do several thousand 1098s every year. That tells them what any payments went towards taxes and interest, so they can use in their income tax return. We set up all their QuickBooks accounts. We set up all their operational banking accounts. They can change them if they want. Their reserves go into 2 accounts, so we help them set up their reserves where those accounts are set up. And they have an operational reserve account, and they have a capital improvement reserve account. So set those up. The manager does all the books, pays all the bills. The treasurer signs all the checks. President does too. So pretty straightforward.
So you mentioned security, like parking underground. Is there any kind of security staff?
We don't have a security staff. We do have security cameras around all the exterior doors. I think we have 5 exterior doors. They all have cameras. They're all locked. Everything's kept locked. The garage is on typically a 45-second timer. So when they pull in, they wait. They all follow it. They wait till the garage door closes, and then they pull into their space.
And then going back around to where you're talking about there's a wait list. If the owner of the unit or the share, are they allowed to pick who they would like if they had somebody in mind that met the criteria, or do they have to sell to the next person in the wait list?
Yeah, so great question. Can they pick who they sell to? So I use the term waterfall. Here's the waterfall of a resale. So who gets first priority and then on down. In a resale situation, the first priority is if they've done a transfer on death certificate to a family member, because that is more common than you would think.
Right.
Where daughter moves in, and as long as they're age qualified and have the assets and income to live there. The second step is the co-op has the first right to buy it back. Typically, our co-ops don't, for that appreciated value. Typically, they don't, but they have the right to, and we know some who do.
So they have the right of first refusal?
Yep, they have the right of first refusal to buy that share back, and they do that so people don't circumvent the wait list. Because we have wait lists with 70, 80 people on them.
Right.
So it's so that you don't skip the whole wait list. It's a check. When someone resells, the co-op can have the right to buy that share.
So, and that's in front of, like you said, the death certificate.
Death certificate's first.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So that's first priority. Then co-op. After co-op, people living in the building. So after 50% of the homes are sold, people are getting their second and third choices. So they'll move in and say, I'm in this home, but I really want that third floor looking at Pikes Peak. So I want to be on that. Well, you're 5th on that list. So they go to the inside of the building, and then last priority is people on the outside. We have people offer money to move up to the wait list.
Right.
We don't do that, but people get on the wait list, and sometimes they can take a long time. And sometimes they're a year of a wait list, so people plan ahead. The others?
Any other questions about the co-op operation before we get into the site plan kind of portion of the presentation?
Okay, all right. So we had, like I said before, we had our neighborhood meeting on April 7th. I wanted people to, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but we had in the range of 35 people there. It might have been as many as 40. It was definitely more than 30 in the room. And I wanted people to understand, number one, I believe without a shadow of a doubt, we are the best neighbor possible, but I want you all to think that. So what are the concerns? So the concerns came out. And so we tried to go through every one of those and, again, tonight, go through those if there are additional concerns. And Clayton was super helpful in answering some that I had no idea what the answer was to. So privacy. We want to have privacy. Totally understand. I would too. So this site allows us to place this building 120 feet from the property line. It's set back significantly. And then we agreed we will raise that wall up and make it 8 feet. And we agreed we will make sure the landscaping is significantly enhanced over here as well. I believe we've definitely addressed that. We also are going to extend the wall beyond the southern property line so that it doesn't stop in the middle of someone's house. So that wall is going to extend to the south to make sure it's not an awkward transition, for lack of a better term. Provide enhanced design emergency access only gate at Clara Drive. So Clayton pointed out the 2 drives over there, Clara Drive being the one that stubs out to this property. And we are definitely providing an enhanced, very nice emergency access only. In fact, there was a lot of discussion around the emergency access gate. One of them, which was a really good point, and I would ask the same thing is, let's build it first so that construction traffic doesn't come through, right? So we're going to build that part first, but we also want to put signage out there so construction traffic does not come through. The other thing is, I can't guarantee we can do this, but it's on our list, is our hope would be to get, sometimes it's hard with Google, but Google addressing is to make sure the address for the site that goes on the prints lines up with coming in off Davis and not through Saddlebrook. So that's something we talked to the neighborhood about, that we're definitely going to, manipulate's the wrong term because no one manipulates Google, but Google addresses, get that address right in there, so then when a sub that's dropping off materials is not going through Saddlebrook and they're coming from Davis onto the drive there. Balconies on the Village Cooperative looking next door towards the neighbors was a comment that was brought up. So we're spacing the building 120 feet away. We obviously talked about the buffering that we're doing, but we've also located, there's only 4 balconies and they're on the corner, not on the west end. So if you look closely at that plan, the balconies, anybody that has a chair on an outside balcony is going to be looking directly south or directly north. They're not going to be looking west because the decks were put on the corner of the building. And we did that up front. I mean, we anticipated that one. So that went into the design right up front. Preventing construction traffic access, this is kind of redundant. We'll prevent construction access to the site from the neighborhood to the west through signage, building of emergency gate first, and working to make sure the address is appropriately placed in Google. Stormwater management. Somebody brought this up. I had no idea this would even come up. This one was new to me. But there is a stormwater. Clayton touched on it. He has pictures of it. A lady at the neighborhood meeting asked, what are you going to do about our stormwater management? I didn't know the answer to that. Clayton appropriately answered it with, the city can come out there if you have any kind of maintenance or backing, call us. And it's our responsibility to go out there and make sure it was built with anticipation of development here. And we're improving the site. But if that comes up, I want to make sure I'll probably point to McAdams and Clayton to elaborate on that answer, but I just want to point out that was a concern that was brought up. Sufficiency of parking was brought up. Do we have enough parking? So we have to do, and Colorado is kind of obsessed with parking studies. We have to do parking studies all the time. And we're accustomed to doing this, and we'd be happy to provide if you needed further detail on it. But basically, we have about 55% couples and 45% singles on average in our communities. Couples typically have 2 cars. We have 57 spaces underneath. We have 28 on the outside. We actually have gone on Google Earth and done parking studies for other projects where we can show and prove that all of our other developments typically use about 9 to 13 stalls on average on the outside, and that's it. So it's minimal usage on the outside, partially because it's 45% singles on average. Couples will typically over time downsize to 1 car, but we have a lot more parking on the outside than we need, but we do it because if they have community gatherings, anniversary celebrations, holiday celebrations, we want enough out there for everybody. Light transfer across the property is a common question we get, and we got from some of the neighbors on this one. We might have to agree to disagree a little bit on this. We aren't transferring any light across this property. We can't. In fact, the lights will be closer to the building than they will to the neighbors, and we can't have light going in the windows where our owners are living. So they're down shooting lights. Sure, today, there's nothing on the site, so it's dark if you look across the site. If you look at it with our development, you will see lighting. Is it going to transfer all the way to the property line? It will not at all. And I think we've answered that, but if we need further explanation, I'd be happy to get into that further. Landscaping and cleaning up of landscaping along the northern property line. So people asked if we'd maintain trees along the northern property line. I've heard mixed emotions on that. It needs to be cleaned out, and other people said, hope you keep them. We're going to keep what we can keep. We don't want to take out trees. Not only are they nice to have, but there's also a cost to it. But if we're going to grade this site for this building and we're going to hit roots, we don't want our co-op owners to replace trees in 3 years that we scrape the roots of. So there's going to be a lot of tree planting along the northern boundary line after we clean it up. But as Clayton pointed out, there is at least the one large tree that you saw that we're going to try to make sure we maintain that there. So the city had comments as well. So I want to point out the comments we received back from the city and what solutions. So we were asked to make a vehicle connection to the commercial to the north. So we're providing a paved connection to the property line to the north. We were asked to provide sidewalk connectivity all the way to Davis and then connect to the commercial to the north. We agreed. So Clayton, I think in the work session, showed you the sidewalk connectivity there all throughout the property. We were asked to increase the width of the drive aisle at the connection to Davis. We agreed. We're providing a very nice, high-quality looking gate at Clara Boulevard. I thought we had a nice one, but we enhanced it even more. And that was at the city's request, and we agreed. So to conclude this, and then we'll get into site planning questions, we believe very firmly the co-op is the best option here, and I hope you all agree. We know this is desperately needed here. I mean, we don't fly out of state with our entire company if the numbers don't justify it. And this justifies it almost as much as anywhere I've ever seen. This location ranks near the top of any locations we have looked at over the last 2 years, which includes 10 states, 50 plus cities, probably in the range of 500 to 700 sites. The Village Cooperative meets a desperate need for housing for retirees who are active adults and do not need or want traditional senior housing. We want to be in North Richland Hills. We're choosing North Richland Hills as our first community in Texas and in DFW. We also want to be a great neighbor. We'll protect this neighborhood with our attention to these solutions and working with the staff. We're as quiet a neighbor. Probably 80% of our developments are in neighborhoods. Seniors want to be connected to a neighborhood. We build them small on purpose so they have a community, but we build them small because we want to be a great neighbor too. The Village Cooperative owners simply are going to bring economic strength to the Davis corridor, the nearby commercial centers. It definitely will bring disposable income and economic strength to this area. So we ask for your support this evening for the thousands of active retirees who are soon or will be actively looking very shortly. And we will get angry people call us when this, hopefully if we get approved, under construction with why we're not doing more homes. And the reality is that I've seen these age. I've seen the way they work. The right thing to do is to keep them small. The residents appreciate it. They form a community. They form a family. We're able to locate these in wonderful locations because they are small. And it's a lot easier for the community to manage itself versus 180 homes or 240 homes. So we ask for your support, and I'd be happy to go through any other questions you have. Thanks for your time this evening.
Go ahead, Don.
If you evidently, have you bought this entire piece of property? What is it, 8 acres?
So the acreage is 8.33 acres. It's owned by LC Tubb, and many of you probably know that name. And we have a contract with him for 3.5 acres of it.
Well,
So he owns the remainder. So he'd own the remaining, whatever that is, 4.7.
Are we rezoning the entire property or just this portion? Okay, so the remainder of it will stay commercial. Okay, thank you.
The remainder of it would stay ag. No, thank you.
Going back to the parking, is it space available or is there assigned parking?
So in the garage, everybody has one space assigned. They pick which number space based on their priority number. So every home has one in the garage. There are a couple extra. And then a second car, there's plenty of room on the outside. But everybody gets one in the garage, minimum.
Wendy?
I have a question, please. Can you talk a little bit about the grading? So I understand the trees will most likely need to be removed because of the grading along the north side. But when you're grading, I'm thinking about that fence line to the west.
Mm-hmm. I'll pull up.
You're putting up an 8-foot fence.
Mm-hmm.
With grading, will that actually be even higher?
So I pulled up the landscape plan here with our proposed tree plantings and landscaping. So when it's graded, I believe, Justin, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but the current grade as it exists, will it be higher on the west boundary line? Malene? Yeah, that'll work. Oh, you've got a cross section? Perfect.
So here's a cross-section of the site. Davis is on your right, and the Saddlebrook residential neighborhood is on the left. So we'll be sloping up from the west to come up and set the finished floor of the building. And coming down from the north, there'll be a retaining wall that will drop down maybe 3 to 5 feet off the north property line, and we'll just balance it as appropriately as we can. So does that answer?
The western boundary line's lower than the building first floor elevation, which is how it is today.
Yeah.
Will it be any lower than what it is currently?
Western boundary line,
Yes.
no. I don't think
No,
it is.
it'll be what it is today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant before the vast staff presentation?
Maybe this is something Clayton's going to cover, but have you had discussions with TxDOT about acceleration, deceleration lanes on Davis?
Yep. I'll let Justin talk on that.
So the current proposed connection to Davis meets the needs of the proposed development that we're trying to get zoned today. We have had a preliminary meeting with TxDOT this week to talk about that drive location and ensure that we get it at a location that they're going to approve. The need for a southbound deceleration lane would not be needed for this development. When the rest of the property develops and intenser use requirement that creates more trips generated, at that time there may be a decel lane required, but it wouldn't be until the rest of the property develops.
Would this be a right-in, right-out entrance to the property?
No, sir,
Would not?
it would not. And our intention is to line it up with the Alamo Draft House. So, because it's 6 lanes, right? It's a Davis 6-lane road. So that you avoid that conflicting left turn traffic coming out of those 2 drives with an offset intersection.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay if I make a couple comments of some concerns that I feel may be
We're still in the applicant presentation section.
So,
Your name and address for the record, though?
yes, sir. My name is Justin Lansdowne. I'm with McAdams, address 201 Country View Drive, Roanoke, Texas, 76262. And I'm stealing Clayton's presentation here. I apologize. Find the right slide. So a couple of the concerns I think that might be arisen during public input and questions y'all may have. First, I wanted to address the drainage. The site today drains to the west, right? And it's all overland flow, and it currently drains into those flumes that are on the eastern property line of Saddlebrook. We will be taking approximately 75 to 80% of that runoff that today is just overland flow into those flumes into the street. We're going to be taking it underground and getting it into the storm system so that that water that's going to the flumes today is going to be reduced. And it's going to get underground, and any kind of potential flooding in that flume, even though they're sized to handle the improvements, we're getting it underground quicker than it is today. And then along the north property line, there's a picture that shows a lot of foliage there and a lot of trees, right? And I've got the number, and if I believe, even though that picture looks very green, there's a lot of trees, if you call them trees, bushes, whatever you want to call them, but there's only 4 or 5 protected trees on that fence line. The rest of them are smaller, they're overgrown, they're not manicured. So we're only removing about 4 protected trees off that northern property line, and then we're replacing back with multiple trees above and beyond the landscaping ordinance.
Those hackberries are tough, though. If you pull that retaining wall off that property line a couple of feet, they can live through it. Well, I know you don't. I understand you don't want to take the risk with trees dying and then having to replace them, but those are some of the toughest trees that you encounter on a construction site. But they're probably halfway through their life cycle.
And that brings up a couple other points. There were some other comments that we had a discussion in the neighborhood meeting that I thought was healthy and constructive. Was one, looking at this, what's called out retail commercial, and what can occur in a retail commercial development is the parking goes along the main corridor. So it definitely can push buildings back further and closer to the property line than what we're proposing. But the other thing I think I definitely felt like, and I think some neighbors are here tonight will speak, there was a lot of favoritism towards the buffering from Davis with our development. Because right now it looks right at Davis. And the buffering from Davis. And the other thing that was brought up that I forgot to mention was the parking around the perimeter of the building. I didn't point this out, but we have parking on the front and on the back. We don't have enough room to put it on the north and the south because of the required fire lane access. So we tried to balance it on the east side and on the west side, and then plant the landscaping areas you see there in the middle between the spaces. So that was one other comment that was made at the neighborhood meeting.
Well, I'll ask the question since you have the site plan up. I was going to reserve it for Clayton, but that access drive that goes to the north there, is there something to connect that sidewalk to with just a couple more squares of concrete so that those folks aren't walking all the way out to Davis to hit the sidewalk to go up to the commercial?
So you mean have a sidewalk connection there?
Is it? I don't know what is there existing. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, I don't know either.
He'll know. He'll have 100 pictures.
We don't have an issue with it. If it's not connected today, we don't have an issue with that.
It was kind of a shortcut.
There's not a sidewalk there to connect to, so the sidewalk that would get installed would empty out into the parking lot of the commercial development. So, but I don't see any issue with putting a sidewalk there.
Yeah, we don't.
Any other questions for the applicant before we go to staff? Wendy, you had?
Can you confirm the width of that entrance exit? Is it 24 feet?
Which
Off of Davis, right?
Correct.
You mean off of Davis?
off of Davis, I believe it's 30 feet. There's 3 lanes. It is 36 feet wide, 3 12-foot lanes.
It's 36 at its widest point near the entrance.
It's 24 and then it flares out so that you can have a right, a left, and a right in, right? Okay. But you guys will have to get with TxDOT and they'll run their own calculations on whether you need a deceleration and acceleration lane. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, we've had that conversation with TxDOT. This use does not require the deceleration lane. When the rest of the property develops,
Future traffic
future
demand.
traffic, yeah.
So we're on a lot of major thoroughfares with our communities, and our owners, they don't drive at the AM and peak times. They have the luxury of being able to avoid those times. So it's also, I think an added benefit to it. Okay, well, thank you for your
Thank
time
you
this
very
evening.
much.
If there's
Stand
anything
by.
at the end, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Clayton, you can have what's left.
I'm not sure if there's anything left. I'll try to be brief. So just to summarize, 3.5 acres, northwest corner of an 8.5 acre vacant piece of property that's currently zoned ag. They're requesting 55 independent senior living multifamily units in a cooperative environment, as he mentioned. 6 one-bedroom units and 49 two-bedroom units are being proposed. That equates to just under 16 units per acre density. The Planning and Zoning Commission had a couple of questions of staff before tonight's meeting. Just to put that into context in comparison to a lot of the other multifamily projects that have been approved and developed lately. So just to let you know, the 15.9 dwelling units per acre density is actually the lowest of all the multifamily projects that have been approved recently, within the past 10 years, I should say. The next one closest is 17.8 dwelling units per acre, and that's the Watermere on the Preserve project, which you just heard the plat earlier this evening, and that is also a senior independent living development project. And then they range up to the 35.6 units an acre within the Iron Horse TOD is the largest amount of density. The height that's being proposed on the building, and we'll get a little bit more detail in the building elevations here shortly. 45 feet to the roof peak, and then 30 feet to the primary roof line around the building. As he mentioned, 83 parking spaces are being provided, 57 underground and 26 surface parking spaces. And as he mentioned as well, the parking study was previously provided with the other application last year around this time, last June, on another piece of property. That application was denied by City Council. So that parking study was provided previously, was provided again, that demonstrates their parking needs, and this is actually above their parking needs, what they're providing here. On the landscaping, as he mentioned, about 41% of the site is landscaped, and the primary focus of the landscaping at the staff level, and then of course concerning the neighborhood to the west, is that buffer yard along the west property line. They're proposing a 45-foot deep buffer yard there, where a 15-foot is the minimum requirement, and providing, you can see 13 live oaks, 5 lacebark elms, and 7 Arizona cypress trees. So pretty intense amount of landscaping, higher and above of what is otherwise required. 1 tree per 30 feet is the typical requirement, and 40% of those have to be evergreen trees. So they've exceeded that along this west property line. They have also agreed to provide an 8-foot tall masonry screening wall. You can see the picture there of an example of that masonry screening wall. Would be a precast concrete wall that you see in many other commercial developments that back up to residential. For instance, right across the street from here, the Alamo Draft House has an 8-foot tall precast concrete wall just like this. So it'd be basically consistent with what Alamo Draft House provided behind there. That wall would take the place of the 6-foot tall wood fence along that concrete flume. So basically it would just be replaced there. This is the landscape plan for the remainder of the site. I wanted to bring this up because of the north property line discussions. As Justin mentioned in his portion of the presentation, a lot of those trees on the north property line are fence line trees or considered junk trees. They're simply vegetation along a fence line that hadn't been maintained for a very long time. So it's just simply fence line growth. There are about 4 protected trees that they will be removing. Those include American elms and post oaks. And there are 2 existing trees that are going to be protected. One is at the far northwest corner of the site, in this location here, and then another one is at the far northeast corner, that particular tree there. The remainder of the site along the north property line will be planted with eastern red cedars, vitex, and lacebark elms along the north property line. So that is the overall landscape plan that the applicant has provided us. Just to mention vehicular access, I think we talked about a lot this evening. There is no direct frontage for this lot along Davis Boulevard, so the common access easement that's going through that front property will be part of the plat as this moves forward. That off-site property would be platted, and that conceptual approval. The driveway location is still pending. As Justin mentioned, they have the approval for a driveway, but the specific location of that driveway is yet to be approved. And as the commission noticed, that is a 36-foot wide driveway throat as you get closer to Davis Boulevard. That driveway was also, I apologize, it's not really shown here on the screen, directly across from the driveway for Alamo Draft House. So the two of them align. Hopefully, in the future, when medians do come along Davis Boulevard, that would allow for a full median opening for full left turns and right turns at that location. Emergency access is being provided to Clara Drive. As I mentioned earlier in the first portion of my presentation, Saddlebrook Estates has greater than 30 residential units, so that is required by code to have some sort of second point of entry for emergency access vehicles. So that's now being accomplished by this connection to Saddlebrook Estates. And then this development too, you think about it, it has 55 residential units. It would also be required to have 2 points of access. So that provides that second point of access for this development as well. And then future access to the shopping center to the north, that was mentioned by the commission. That's currently located in this location here on the north property line. Right now, that current alignment kind of aligns with the back of a building, so there's further discussion there that might need to happen. But the intent there is to simply stub a driveway access to the north for future connection. We're not talking about it being immediate, because there's nothing on the north side of this property within the commercial shopping center to actually connect to it. The idea being, you recall the Mutt Shack was an example of a special use permit that came before P&Z and City Council in that shopping center. The idea being that whenever that shopping center comes back again for a zoning change or a special use permit, that could be a condition of approval to connect the two. So that's simply put in place there as a future connection. And then, of course, it would be an opportunity for that commercial shopping center to get very easy access to 55 residential units for their businesses as well. So it might just be that they want to connect immediately. On the bottom of your screen, you see the design of the Clara Drive emergency access gate that would have a Opticom and Knox box systems for emergency access. So it would not be a gate that could be opened just by anybody. It would be a locked gate, opened only by emergency access, ambulance or fire engine or what have you. They also mentioned pedestrian access. That was a concern that the Development Review Committee had. The 55 residential units here without any kind of sidewalk connection to Davis Boulevard would be on an island where they would be required to get in their car if they wanted to just go to the north to the adjacent shopping center. So having them get in a car, cross 4 lanes of traffic to go north just to come back into the shopping center that they're adjacent to seemed like it really necessitated a pedestrian connection. So that green line on your screen there, that is the location of all the sidewalks that are being planned as part of this development. So out to Davis Boulevard and up to the north. Of course, as those pad sites develop to the south of that driveway along Davis Boulevard, additional sidewalks will be provided at that time. And then you also have a pedestrian connection to the west at Clara Drive through a pedestrian access opening. Yeah.
That sidewalk goes out to the west into that neighborhood. Does it also provide access to the green belt?
No, there's no formal access from Saddlebrook Estates to the green belt that's further to the southwest.
Clayton, what is the purpose of that gate? I can't imagine any Saddlebrook residents wanting to get into this development or vice versa. What's the purpose of that?
The residential, I'm sorry, the pedestrian opening or
Pedestrian opening.
The pedestrian opening. That also allows for Saddlebrook Estates residents to get access to that commercial area as well. So understanding the vehicle gate, you of course don't want to have cut through traffic go through either of these developments, Saddlebrook Estates or this. So that's why the vehicular gate is. But the pedestrian access gate has been applied to all the emergency access gates that have been approved in the past, let's call it 10 years. So Liberty Village, St. Joseph Estates, Watermere, Brynwick, and some others, there's always a pedestrian opening to allow for free flow of pedestrians between properties. That allows for shorter blocks for somebody to walk to a commercial establishment. So somebody on the far south side of Saddlebrook Estates, for instance, could walk through here once this property is platted and has that pedestrian access easement on it to get to Davis Boulevard. And you know, there's again, there's pad sites in front of this development that could have other things like coffee shops or other commercial establishments that Saddlebrook Estates might not be interested in now. They might not want to go to Sonic, but who knows what might come in the future in front of this development.
Okay.
And then another slide on the screening wall. I won't belabor that point. On the building materials, as you know, the state legislature in 2019, it's been 2 years already, passed a bill that prohibits cities from regulating building materials. So even though I'm showing you this slide and showing you how much brick and siding they have on their proposed elevations, the city can't regulate it. And that's true of all developments coming into the North Richland Hills moving forward. The red boxes indicate the brick and stone percentages per facade. Prior to HB 2439, before 2019, that was a minimum of 85%. So there was a much larger requirement for brick and stone or masonry on all buildings, residential and commercial and multifamily. So you can see what they're providing here, averaging about 14.1% among all the elevations on brick, and then about 5% on the stone veneer. And you can see those, that's the stone veneer there and the brick. And then the glazing, we always like to point out too, because a good sweet spot for glazing, which is your windows and door coverage, is about 20%. So they're close to that. You recall in our transit-oriented development districts, we actually push 30% because of the desire to make it more of an activated street frontage. So 30% is ideal for more of an urban environment. So these are the building elevations. The top one is the north elevation that faces the commercial shopping center to the north. The bottom elevation, that's the east elevation that faces Davis Boulevard. The top elevation is the south elevation that faces more of the remainder of the undeveloped vacant piece of land. And then the bottom is the west elevation that faces the Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood. And as they were mentioning in their portion of the presentation, these two wings here, both in this location here and this location here that face Saddlebrook, they've put their patios on the corners of those wings. So they're not facing out towards Saddlebrook Estates. They're instead on the corners. I do want to mention, and this is in the staff report as well, the remainder of this 8.3 acre property. It's as I mentioned earlier, it is planned for retail commercial, the entire 8.3 acres. So it's definitely a good thing that the applicant has reserved frontage along Davis Boulevard for retail commercial. This is what makes it stand out from the previous application of last year, where they were taking an entirety of office commercial planned area and changing it to high density residential. This at least preserves the frontage along Davis Boulevard for retail commercial uses, very similar to the Watermere project at Precinct Line in Davis. I recall that the frontage there was also retained for retail commercial uses in that location. So a whole lot of similarities here between this site and the Watermere site, just as far as scale is concerned, much smaller here.
Leighton, are the properties south of all of this also in the long use plan? Are they also commercial?
Immediately south of here, it transitions to office commercial on the west side of Davis Boulevard. So it goes from retail commercial here to office commercial to the south. And that designation sticks around for quite a while because, and there's some floodplain, of course, with the Little Bear Creek corridor. And then you got some multifamily. Yeah, so we've got a number of different land uses proposed and recommended on that the western side of Davis Boulevard, but this is the last one south that has retail commercial designation. So one thing we did want to mention about this, and want to make sure that the property owner, because the property owner is the same for the full 8.3 acres, is aware that these pad sites are actually very shallow, not very shallow, they're shallower than a lot of the pad sites that we are seeing these days come in for, let's say, an Andy's or a Starbucks or a McDonald's or something like that. These are 230 feet in depth, and as you can see here, this ring road, the fire lane ring around the Century Hills building is contained on the Century Hills lot. It's not shared in between the two properties, and their landscape plan also has a significant amount of landscaping here. So that we can see that those pad sites are going to have their own circulation for each of their pads. So what that does is it decreases even more the developability, the depth, right? Because you're going to now have parking, another fire lane, a parallel fire lane to this, in the back or definitely in the front, so it's going to eat up the developability and the lot depth. A couple of other examples of lot depths, the ones in front of Alamo Draft House, 280 feet. We see a lot of 300-foot lot depths. So just a concern that staff has with these areas in front of, immediately in front of the Century Hills property, and limiting the amount of uses that could go there in the future. Now, the portion on the south, no problem there. But we just want to make sure that the commission was aware that this would be limiting the opportunities, limiting the options for developing along Davis Boulevard in the future.
Could you put something the size of the development across the street from Birdville High School in that area?
Office uses?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then also, because this is now considered residential, that moves the residential adjacency standards further to the east. So all these pad sites along Davis Boulevard will now require their own masonry screening wall, their own landscape setbacks. So it's likely going to be that you see these pad sites in the future, not just as a zoning change from ag to C1, but likely from ag to a planned development district to waive those residential adjacency standards, like you did with the Dutch Brothers. Recall that they had the requirement for a masonry screening wall, and that was removed with that PD for Dutch Brothers. So kind of the same thing. Again, this and the Watermere project are very similar. Just to touch on a couple of, this is a PD, and they have the R7 MF district as the base district for the plan development in this case. So I just want to share with you the differences between the R7MF and the proposed PD, where they're asking for variances or waivers to. The first is the minimum lot area. 4 acres is required under the R7MF district, and they have 3.5 acres. The maximum height, did want to point that out, that they are allowed to go up to 50 feet, and they're coming in at 45 feet. Also of note, on the previous application last year, you recall that the 120-foot separation between existing residential and the building was the big issue. They have eliminated that now, and it's 121 feet away from the existing residential for the entire building. So there is no proximity variance being requested here with this application. Masonry screening walls are required along major thoroughfares for R7MF. There's no need for that here, really, along Davis Boulevard. Gated entry is normally required in your standard multifamily district, and they're not proposing a gate here. Emergency access gate, but not a private gate for the development. And then the parking we've talked about, 2 spaces per 1-bedroom unit and 2.5 spaces for 2 or more bedroom units. So that would require them to have 135 parking spaces, and they're requesting to have 83 parking spaces instead of that 135. This came up at the neighborhood meeting that they had. Outdoor lighting is always a question that comes up when you have a tall building or a commercial or multifamily development adjacent to the existing single family. So I just want to bring this up. We do look at outdoor lighting. The applicant did provide a photometric plan. So this lays out all the outdoor lighting fixtures on the property. You can see there's only one parking lot light on the west facade or the west property line. That would be a maximum of 20 feet tall. And then you have 2 in the front. So those are the taller parking lot lights that you normally associate with the light trespass or the glare with adjacent properties. The rest of those, all those green boxes, those are those pedestrian bollards, and that sidewalk that loops around. So those are the more pedestrian scale lighting, lower in height, usually 3 or 4 feet tall. And then there's the wall packs, which there's only on the south and the north facades of the building, are the wall pack lights. That's usually to light and highlight entrances to the building. And we talked about this already with the cross section and how the property slopes from the east to the west, and that's how they will continue to develop the site. So with that, I know it wasn't nearly as long as the applicant's presentation, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. This is scheduled to go to City Council and have a public hearing at City Council as well on June 14th, and I'll be happy to take any questions that the Commission has.
Anyone have questions for Clayton or the applicant?
I had one about the parking. So it looks like there's only 83 available, but there's a requirement for over 100? Is that correct?
Yeah, so they're asking for a reduction in the parking requirement. 135 spaces will be required if they followed the zoning code for multifamily developments. So if they put all their checked all their boxes and did their parking analysis, our code, the Northeastern Hills Code, would require 135 spaces.
For traditional multifamily?
For traditional multifamily, yes.
We don't have a code specific to
That, yeah, we don't have a code specific
restricted
to
multifamily.
senior independent living. That's right. And that's why they've provided their parking study that he referenced. You know, Colorado makes them do quite a bit of those. So they've shown staff that their facilities require X number of parking spaces and that they are providing more than what they require themselves. So.
Greg?
On that, I'm curious, I assume, this is for the applicant, I assume that they can't have adult children or teenage grandkids or anything like that living with them, or is there restrictions on how long? Because that would probably contribute to some parking woes if this was approved.
Yeah, we don't have any adult children living anywhere that I'm aware of. We've had some healthcare issues where the grandparents provided some help and they stayed there temporarily, but not living there permanently.
That's not allowed by the bylaws.
You have to have one person 62 and over. So if it's a couple and one's below 62, that's allowed. It's debatable, but we don't have any kids living in any co-ops. I mean, it's not where anybody'd want to live. I mean, I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's not. Now, there has been situations where a grandparent's had to take care of their grandchild for a while, temporarily, but there's no grandchildren living there permanently.
Does that require any kind of like board approval or anything like that?
Yeah, they'd have to have board approval if there was a permanent resident situation. And the other thing that didn't get brought up, I can't remember if it was brought up by the neighborhood, but there is no RV parking. There's no boat parking. We get asked that a lot up north because there's a lot of lakes. So it's not allowed.
Any other questions for staff or applicant before we open up the public hearing? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The public hearing is open for case ZC 2021-01. Chad Van Steenberg will call up speakers that have filled out speaker cards in the order they were received. When you come up to the podium, if you would give your name and address for the record, and then after you're done doing that, you'll see a 3-minute timer up on the screen, and you have basically 3 minutes to address the commission. Chad, do you have any?
Chairman, we received a request from David Young. Good evening. My name is David Young. I live a few blocks south of here at, I'm a little nervous now, 612 North Booth Callaway Road. I've been living there it's in Hearst. I've been living there for about 15 years now. I'm in favor of this. I'm going to be one of the prospective members and owners. This is an ideal situation for myself and my wife. We've been looking for the last few years for an ideal place to move because she wants to basically get rid of the house that she's living in now. We're at the age we're at, and I've just recently retired. I don't want to maintain a house. I had one for a while. I loved it. I was proud of my yard. It was great. But I'd rather spend my time doing other things, like traveling, associating with other couples that are in a similar situation to myself and my wife. And I think this place would be perfect for that. And I'm looking forward to moving there. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, Don has a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Young, do you have 2 cars?
I do not. I do not drive. I am legally blind and I'm not able to drive. My wife right now is my transportation for the most part, or I walk.
Okay, thank you.
I have a card from Sandra Branch.
Hi, my name is Sandra Branch. I live at 304 Greenbrier Lane in Colleyville. We are married, but because I take care of my elderly mother, I stay at the house with her. So anyway, we are looking to sell the house I'm in and move in to the co-op so we can be together all the time. And I'm already retired, so I don't need to go out and do a lot of shopping. We're just looking to live a stress-free life because the last 2 years in the house, we have spent a ton of money on trees being removed. We've had plumbing work done. We've had a new roof. And I'm just tired of it. I want to get rid of the house and let the co-op take care of all of that maintenance stuff. So that's all. Thank you.
James Harris.
Okay, my name is actually Jim Harris. I live at 1432 Cat Mountain Trail in Keller, 76248. My wife Kathleen and I have lived, we would just like to speak today of our support for the proposed Village Cooperative of Century Hills. In 2018, I retired after 38 years with IBM. We began investigating our future need to downsize our home and prepare for a fixed income future. We looked at 55-plus active adult communities all of the way from Little Elm to Mansfield and even Red Oak. We also investigated smaller homes in Granbury, Waco, and Temple. What we found didn't seem to make financial or practical sense to us. We honestly love where we live. We moved to this area 28 years ago. We currently live 1 mile west down North Tarrant Parkway from the proposed site of the Village Cooperative of Century Hills. We have witnessed stable, steady, thoughtful growth throughout North Richland Hills and Keller over the years. We were here before North Tarrant Parkway was completed from Ruth Snow to Davis and Precinct Line completed from Mid-Cities to North Tarrant Parkway. We raised all 5 of our children from Shady Grove Elementary through Keller High School. The Village Cooperative gives us the ability to stay in the community that we love. We live in a neighborhood in which the homeowners have always been concerned progress in the area would affect property values, so we understand those who may have concerns. This cooperative is not low income or in any way federally subsidized housing. This is especially important in today's political climate that is appearing to support such in suburban areas. Our neighborhood is becoming much more multi-generational. We have a next door neighbor whose husband passed away last year who, along with her loss, is struggling with all of the home maintenance issues that come up from time to time. Just down the street from her are two families who recently moved in with small children. Our neighborhood will continue to stay vibrant as younger families move in and are able to enjoy our neighborhood and take advantage of the excellent school district. I was a business analyst in my career, so it was my job to review facts and make recommendations. Spreadsheets were and still are my friend, much to the irritation of my wife. The cooperative concept makes really good sense to us because it gives us an opportunity to realize the appreciated value of our home over the last 28 years with only a portion invested in the cooperative share. The owners have a vested interest in the management of the cooperative, which will ensure a pride of ownership along with being a good neighbor. In summary, the cooperative offers a sense of community, security, and value to its owners, and we think a beautiful addition to the adjoining neighborhood and community. And I just thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
How am I doing on time?
You ran out.
Susan Emke.
Susan is not here. Did she write anything on her speaker card for or against or something to be read into the record?
She wanted to speak in favor, but
Wanted to
no other
speak in
text.
favor?
Correct.
Okay.
Paul Gordon.
Maybe you can hear me better. Hi. Thanks for the opportunity to address y'all tonight. My name's Paul Gordon. I live at 8109 Hallmark in North Richland Hills, which is actually just across the street in Thornbridge. So I have a unique perspective, not only as a potential owner of one of these units, but currently as someone who's concerned about, the value of the neighborhood. So my situation, I was a sales executive for a number of years for a Canadian paper company. We moved to North Richland Hills about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, my wife passed away 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. So I'm living in a big house in Thornbridge, 4,200 square feet by myself, and it's empty and it's full of a lot of sad memories. I invited my son and his family to move in with me about a year and a half ago, and that's filled a big void in my life and really helped me kind of get through the sadness that I was experiencing. But I'm in a transition period. I'm 68 years old. I'm active. I'm healthy. I volunteer in the community. I'm the manager of the North Richland Hills Hawks 65 and older softball team. We play at Northfield, and we won last year, so hooray for us, right? So I'm not ready to go to a managed community, and this thing just kind of ticks off all the boxes for me, right? I love this area. That spot there, for those of you that don't live in Thornbridge, man, we got everything. I got the Alamo across the street. I got the 3 drugstores within about 600 yards of this place. We got the nice Kroger and all the fast food places, and I just love living where I live. So it's a perfect spot for me. In addition, it's also ticks off the boxes from a financial standpoint. I may, as I mentioned, my son's living with me now. I may keep that house and let them live in it and move into this place. Because that makes some sense for me from a financial perspective, to keep that as an investment, and then to have this place continue to appreciate. And I like the fact that I'm not paying rent to Watermere, right? I'm putting this rent basically back in my own pocket. So as an investment, it makes total sense. As a place to live, it's perfect for me. And in my particular situation as a widower, I'm anxious to not only have the opportunity to move into a very nice facility, but also to meet a lot of other really nice people that I've met already, and I'm anxious to get to know better. So I investigated these guys a lot. I'm not a financial spreadsheet guy, but I'm glad we have those guys to vet all this, and I trust them. But I am a guy who knows what he wants and who's been used to kind of making decisions, important decisions, and this is an important decision in my life at this particular transition point. So I see my time's almost up. I just wanted to tell you all I'm behind this 100%, and as a current resident of North Richland Hills, it just makes perfect sense for me to have something like this available to us. So I hope you'll approve this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Pamela Copeland.
I'm Pam Copeland, 8344 Saddlebrook Drive. All of this sounds wonderful, but I'm here to tell you the kind of the other side. Our home is in, I don't know if y'all can see it, this northwest corner. This is where the catch-all for the water is in the line of trees, and that's our home right there. We lived in Grapevine for 28 years. Kids are gone, and we moved to North Richland Hills to a beautiful home in order to take in my 9-year-old dad. And so what we expected was peace and quiet. And this is a beautiful plan for them. I am not against the co-op. I'm against it in my backyard. It's taking a building this size and putting it, because we measured 35 yards from us. So if we all stood at the windows and looked down, that's how visible we're going to be. We're going to lose all privacy. The back porch where we would sit and enjoy and be with my dad is just going to be a viewing spot now. Now, I came in with all my questions, and I've added a whole lot more sitting here. When you say there's an 8-foot wall going up, that they increased it by 2 feet, that really doesn't do anything for privacy, because you've got 2 more stories above there. We are still on view 24 hours a day, if anybody wants to. From our garage to our back porch, there is no privacy now. There will not be with a plan like this. On doing your grading, excuse me, we have that catch-all in the back. That's where it's graded to, is in that corner of our yard. It does concern me that the grading is going to continue from east to west, and more runoff with our gully washers, I call them. I don't know if that will hold. I mean, what proof is there? There's been no, I think, real guarantee. And what if our yard floods all the time? Because we're right there. That's where it's going to drain. Not only that, there was a question about the grading. I believe you brought it up, and the fence would go down. He even said there's not a guarantee that they will make it higher than 8 feet to make it even. So then we're exposed even more. We don't get the benefit with an 8-foot fence. Let me ask what, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a look here. I took so many, oh shoot, almost out of time. Anyway, I want the best for them, but I want the best for us also. And we're going to lose everything that we just bought last October. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, your name again was?
Pam Copeland.
Pam Copeland, thank you.
Angelo Puma.
I give you, sir, the sheets from other owners that had this stuff away. Angelo Puma, resident 8624 Clara Drive, North Richland Hills 76182. I would argue that the proposed development probably impacts me more than anybody else in the community, with the exception of my neighbor that's directly across the street. So the two of us are probably most impacted because we're closest to the site. I've talked preliminarily to the project manager or the site plan developers, had good conversation with them over the phone. As my fellow neighbor stated, I'm not opposed to their plan, but I am opposed to the investment that I put in to my house in North Richland Hills and what this plan could do for it. I know that whenever I talked to Clayton Comstock on the phone, we talked about the access point when Saddlebrook Estates was developed. So when Saddlebrook Estates was developed, and Clayton, I don't know, can you help me pull up the picture that shows Bridle Path and Claire?
Can you take off the screen? Is this okay?
The picture that shows our houses in relation to, I'm sorry.
Aerial photograph or a picture?
It was an aerial photograph, like a site concept. Showed us in proximity to.
Is that okay?
So when Saddlebrook Estates was developed, you can see at the two fingers here at Clara and at Bridle Path, Clayton said that that was stubbed out originally to have an access point because we exceed, I guess, the number of homes in the area to only have one entry and exit into the neighborhood. My argument is when we were sold our houses, we were told by the developer at that time that that would potentially be future residential property, single-family residential, and the way that those stubbed out, it certainly looked like that could be a second phase to Saddlebrook Estates. I don't understand why the city would have approved our Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood with those two entrances or exits blocked, but have two access points that would terminate into future commercial. I also understand that retail and commercial in the main site plan for the city, a lot of times you see in excess of retail and commercial because I believe that it's easier to go from that plan to residential than trying to go the other way from residential to commercial. But it doesn't make any sense to me as a homeowner right there why they would have stubbed out two fingers at that end there at Clara and Bridle Path if that was not intended to be future residential. I do appreciate that the gentlemen have taken the time to reach out to us. I do appreciate that they've tried to make some amends in terms of increasing the screening wall height, making the gate nicer. But the reality is I have a big investment that sits right at the corner there of Claire, and my house, if you want to look on the screen, is this one here. That now I knew I wasn't going to look at a field forever, which is okay, but I also didn't know that I was going to look at a 45-foot building. The building that's to the north, I don't believe is 45 feet in height. The difference, and a lot of people say I would rather have commercial versus this as a neighbor. The difference in the building to the north is there's no windows in the back that look into our neighborhood. So all the neighbors along Saddlebrook there don't have windows that look into them. Now I've got I will have a whole wall of windows, looks into my front yard and my backyard where my pool is.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Excuse me, sir. We have to continue at the public hearing, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bear with me on this. It's difficult to read. Alexander Segretti?
Got it. Good job, Chad.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Alex Segretti. I live at 8349 Saddlebrook in Saddlebrook Estates. I, like the other two speakers for Saddlebrook, are also here to oppose this, mainly because I feel that North Richland Hills is going to become saturated with the senior living facilities. Doing a quick Google search of just North Richland Hills senior living facilities, you can pull up 14 items instantly within Google. Closest to where the planned development is 0.6 miles to the north is the Watermere, which is projected of 227 units to be completed by the end of the year or early first quarter. If you just go 0.8 miles south, you have the villas on Bear Creek, which is an additional 240 units. By the addition of this 55-unit complex, you'll have over 500 units of senior living facility units within 1.5 miles. I live in this area with my wife, my kids, and we have always been excited about the potential of new single-family homes to be built in Saddlebrook for us as a family to grow and have our family meet new, younger families. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and finally we have Brian Copeland.
Hi, Brian Copeland. I live at 8344 Saddlebrook, and I just echo what my wife brought up, plus I want to just bring up a few other items, one of which is I understand that there was a proposal that was previously denied south of where we are, or where the proposed site is. I want to know why they were denied building there. Again, for my wife and I, we're probably unique, and also our neighbors that live right there on Clara, in that there's just a few houses that our privacy is going to be gone. I mean, and we've got a big backyard, but when you take the height of the building that they're proposing, Even though they say there's no balconies that face west, there's windows there, and we're just going to lose our privacy. They say, that one large tree that they say they're going to try to preserve on the corner, that's right at our backyard. There's no guarantee that they can preserve that because if you work construction, trees get distressed, they usually wind up dying. I've seen so many areas where they try to preserve it, but it doesn't take much to stress a tree, and it's gone. You can't save it. The 8-foot fence, again, what my wife said, that's not going to protect our privacy. And our homeowners association won't permit us to put anything up that's going to block a view to help preserve our privacy, like a structure or something. Maybe if we build something that's going to maybe preserve from some privacy for ourselves, we won't be able to do anything like that. What else? Again, my wife mentioned the runoff. Is there any guarantee that our house won't get any kind of flooding or anything like that? I think it's going to reduce our property value. And I just echo what my neighbors talked about their opposition to it. So obviously I'm voicing opposition. We weren't able to attend the April meeting that was conducted. And again, I don't have a problem with having a co-op, but it's just, like I said, we're going to lose our privacy. And but anyway, we were out of town when we weren't able to attend that April meeting. So that's why we're coming up now. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Chad, was that the last card?
That's all the cards we received.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this public hearing? Sir, you can come up to the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
I'm Gerald Cooper, and I stay at 8356 Saddlebrook Drive. I just wanted to make the correction that everybody keeps saying we have 30 homes in our area, and we don't have 30 homes in our area. So when the decision was made to put those two cutoffs to go out to Davis, it was the intent to have 30 plus homes. We only have 29. That's why we only have one in and one out entries right now. And that's why the city approved it. So they assumed that this was done that way because this building's going to be there. That's why we need that back entry. We don't need that back entry. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak during the public hearing? Once the public hearing's closed, we don't reopen it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Wendy, go ahead.
To notate the two documented.
Yes, the commission has received a couple of letters. Wendy, why don't you go ahead and notate those? We don't have to read the extent of them, but you can.
Sure. So Randy Shiflett is in favor, and a Rick and Linda Talbot is also in favor of this project.
Yes, ma'am. You can all leave correspondence with Clayton that can be scanned into the city council's packet. And of course, we've taken your public input at the hearing here. These were letters that were sent by people who were not in attendance. Clayton can address that right quick.
So, as I mentioned during my presentation, this is going to, pending your recommendation and action of the applicant after that recommendation, this is scheduled for the June 14th City Council meeting at 7 p.m. in this council chamber. So on June 14th, it's a Monday, there will be another public hearing. And leading up to that date, we will continue to take any public input either in writing or by email or hard written and mailed in. So anybody can certainly email planning@nrhtx.com and provide public input, or go ahead and hand deliver any kind of letter.
Planning@nrhtx.com. And Clayton, what was the previous case number that Mr. Copeland was asking if he could research that previous case? And he can view the entire P&Z and council video from the city's website.
It was ZC, that's ZC as in zoning change, 2020-03. That was the case number, and it went to City Council. It was June. Thought I had in the staff report. It was June 2020 that the City Council considered it.
The city's website is pretty intuitive. You can go on there and look up that case number. If you have trouble finding it, you can email the planning department and they can send you a link to it. And then you can watch the P&Z and council videos from that case. The same developer presenting a very similar project across Davis and down the road a little ways. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak during the public hearing? Ma'am, you can't speak. That's correct. You can't speak twice. Seeing no others wishing to speak, the public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, before I ask for a motion, do you have any? Well, actually, let's go ahead and ask questions that were raised by those in the public hearing. Caroline, do you mind coming up and telling us first off about the intersection at Davis Boulevard and the process for that, the city worksheet, and then later on getting TxDOT approval, and then also what's going on with the drainage here, whether or not it was stubbed out for fully developed flows, and what the risk is there, if any.
Sure. So starting with traffic, the proposed driveway location aligns with the Alamo driveway across Davis. That was something that we had requested on a staff level. You may recall, or you may be aware, that medians are proposed on Davis Boulevard. They were proposed several years ago. The project didn't move forward. We believe it's just a matter of time before those medians do go in. The Alamo driveway location was going to be probably the furthest north location that we would be successful in having a full median opening that we feel like would be safe. So it made sense to align this driveway with that future full median opening. Otherwise, if it shifted further to the south, it would be a right in, right out only. We did also push for that wider approach to facilitate, more efficient outbound traffic as well as inbound traffic. I was part of the conversation with TxDOT this week as they were discussing that conceptual level approval. TxDOT, obviously, just like us, is very concerned about safety. They believe that there probably is only going to be one approach approved for this entire currently undeveloped property. They, initially were considering pushing it further to the south, which is why we're saying that future location is to be determined. So it could be that driveway location would not align with Alamo if that's TxDOT's ultimate decision. They do believe there will only be that single approach, though, for that entire property. Any other traffic questions?
And if the balance of the 8+ acres were to develop in the future, then they would have to go through and do a traffic impact analysis or a traffic worksheet and potentially expand.
That's correct.
Decel, acceleration lanes, et cetera, depending upon their intensity.
Correct. So the need for a deceleration lane is based on the number of right turns during a peak hour. So with this particular traffic generator, they don't have enough inbound trips, period, during either the AM or the PM peak to warrant to cross that 60 threshold, much less only coming from the north. So it just doesn't meet that requirement. Now, if you come in, just like if you look at the Alamo across the street, because that was a developer looking to develop the entire site and pad it out, they took into account future restaurants, sit-down restaurants, drive-through restaurants, plus the Alamo when they got approval from TxDOT for that driveway, which is why that decel lane went in on day one. Whereas on this side, the zoning is only being done for this particular piece of it. So because it's not known exactly what those final uses would be, they can delay that. Now, one of the things that had come up with TxDOT, one of the reasons they were a little bit concerned is that in the 50-mile-an-hour range, the offset between this proposed driveway and the next driveway to the north, which is right by the Sonic, doesn't meet TxDOT's minimum 425-foot offset spacing. That offset spacing contemplates a full decel lane. We're kind of getting into the weeds of it there. That's one of the things that TxDOT will be considering when they approve a final location, is when this property does develop down the road, if a decel lane is needed, is there a sufficient room to fit that in? So hopefully that helps. So with regard to drainage, as Clayton had mentioned, and the applicant as well, the lay of the land is that the property falls from Davis Boulevard towards the west. When the Saddlebrook neighborhood went in, the underground drainage system that was installed with that neighborhood, that contemplated full development of this site. So there is no need for detention. The pipes are underground. The flumes that are there on the surface collect the surface flow today and protect the homes that are there. So because this is just zoning, we don't have full civil plans at this point, but the basic plan that we've seen, kind of the two-dimensional plan we've seen, they're proposing to carry pipes into the site, collect the developed runoff, and take it underground. Now, I would anticipate that the only flow that would continue to go into those flumes from the site would very likely just be the landscape areas. Any other questions I can help
Any
answer?
other questions for?
So I've got one related to that decel lane, but it may be more towards Clayton. If that were to go in, you are brought up that the depth of that lot is already shorter than most lots that are commercial. So if that decel lane comes in, it further reduces it. Is that going to be grounds for changing it from commercial to something else like office space, or what's the solution there?
And that would affect the lot, just the lot that's north of that driveway, but I'll let him answer the viability question.
Yeah, at the staff level, we did ask the applicant to concept out that particular piece of property because it is, I think it's 3/4 acre in size, and it's a challenging dimension. The geometry of that site. Let's see if I can get a good one. Kind of see it here on this image. It's very challenging site to develop anything commercial on there. So we asked them, lay out a concept, what would it look like? And they did provide more of an office type of layout there. You know, a Dutch Brothers coffee, just as an example. I know we're not going to get another one up here, but would probably fit well in that kind of pad. But if you take that deceleration lane, about 12 feet of additional lot depth away from this lot, then you're right. You're just removing that developability from that already challenged piece of property. Yeah.
Wendy, did you have? I know you're a great note taker. Did you have some other questions that you wanted the applicant or staff to answer in response to public input?
I think we answered. Oh, sorry. I think that we've answered all the questions. That a couple letters that had addressed a few questions, I think they've all been answered.
Gregory, you had something?
Yeah, I've got one for the applicant. On the west side of the building, it is 3 stories. Does the building maintain some type of like window shades?
Yeah, all the windows have shades. Every one of them has 2-inch horizontal blinds.
Because I think that may help address some of the privacy issues. West-facing sun coming down in the evening, those shades are probably going to be down.
Yeah, those shades are going to be down, and they're all horizontal 2-inch.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
A few people brought up the 8-foot versus 6-foot fence and how the additional height of fence didn't provide any additional privacy. Did you upgrade the fence from 6-foot to 8-foot based on feedback from the neighbors?
So the this what's out there right now is that wooden privacy fence, and I didn't measure it, admittedly, but those are typically 5.5 to 6 feet. I don't know what it is exactly out there. It's probably right at about 6 foot. So we had 2 neighbors tell us that whole fence needs to be replaced because they thought it was a bit of an eyesore.
I agree with that.
And so, and after getting feedback from that, and then at the neighborhood meeting that we want privacy there, the Copelands weren't there, but we definitely had others that said we want privacy. We said, okay, well, would it help if we put the fence at 8 feet then? Masonry wall, and it's not sagging, it's a masonry wall. And parts of that fence sags now. And the feedback was, yes, that would definitely help. So that's why we said, sure, we'll do it then.
Well, since that fence is so far removed from the building and an 8-foot fence is only 8 feet tall, I just wonder if the difference in price between a 6-foot and an 8-foot wall wouldn't be better spent in more landscaping that would grow 25 or 30 feet tall.
So,
but I also recall there's a lot of trees being put there already.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want me to pull the, well, you can see it here. It's a little harder to see than our colored one, but it's actually 2 rows of planting. There, perfect. See where it's 2 rows of it, and they're staggered in between. If you did more trees in there, I mean, I'm not saying no to it, but if you did more trees in there, you're going to run into however many years down the road, they're just going to collect, and the branches are just going to be all touching, and I think it's going to be less appealing than the balance of a wall plus the trees spaced so that when they're in full growth.
Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance on this, but is it possible to buy a more mature tree that was taller?
I'm not opposed to looking at that.
Is that, I mean, go back down to a 6-foot, and then that cost difference goes to a more mature tree that's higher than that 8 foot. And you don't add to the tree count, but it's now taller. So
maybe, yeah, and just in some areas that are especially sensitive. That was just a thought that I had. I thought I read in the packet that you started at a 6-foot fence and then upgraded it to an 8-footer.
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. And the deck, so keep in mind the deck, they're facing, and I understand the argument of the windows, but they are all shaded. But the deck floor is at 30 feet. So it's at 30, it's not at 45. And so that, I think the combination of the trees that we're planting with the fence is certainly going to offer that privacy. And I think the 120 feet has a significant distance, whereas if it was housing, it would be much closer, single-family housing.
In the previous case, how close was the building to the nearest property owners?
It was about 90-ish.
I thought I remembered like 47 feet.
There might have been one section that was, because it was a triangular site, so it got pinched.
Yeah, I remember there were some spots that were especially hard hit by that setback.
Yeah, so on that one, we had 4 different corners at all different dimensions. And I think the furthest dimension was in the 97 plus or minus foot range, and then you had some that were closer. So this one, the entire footprint's 121.
Gotcha.
Who currently owns that wooden fence?
It's a great question. I think it's owned by the property owners there. I think. Justin, do you know the answer to that?
I believe it's.
Yeah, I think the fence is on their property.
So by you replacing it, do you assume ownership of it, like that fence, when it becomes a brick wall or a concrete wall, maintenance?
I mean, logically, I think what would have to happen is if we're approved, we'd have to get permission from them to take down their fence, but then put the wall on our land. Put down the 8-foot wall.
That's another thing they benefit from, is no longer trying to maintain that fence. Okay.
Yeah, that's, I mean, logically, that's how I would think it through.
Greg?
I don't know if this is done or not, but you've got 2 rows of trees on the west side. Could you put the fence between them so it creates a bit more of a park-like setting for the neighborhood? That you're going to have the same number of trees, but then the fence being set back away from the neighborhood a few feet might be a little more of a concession, or is that even possible?
One of the challenges with that would be the security gate then. Offset of that. I hadn't thought of that. I haven't thought about that one. I have to probably visit with our team a little bit more about that one. Not saying no to it. We'd have to visit and say what's what are the issues with that? What are the benefits?
Yeah.
Don, do you have?
So I don't think you want the fence off of the property line. You want it as far back as possible. And what is the window elevation of your fourth floor?
Well, we go up 3 floors, and the window.
It's called the fourth floor because you have the garage. But the height of the uppermost window is what, 35 feet?
Plus or minus. Yep. Yep.
If you look at your fence is on the property line, and then there's the drainage, and I believe they have another fence. So if you're in their backyard, you might do some calculations to see, say you're 20 feet off of that fence, exactly if you do the calculations to see how far, if you go 120 feet this way, from 20 feet this way, over the 8-foot fence, it's going to be closest to whether the 20 feet away from the fence they can see the windows or not. If you follow my reasoning, because you've got a side triangle, you've got say 35 feet, you've got 120 plus 20 right here, you've got 8-foot fence. If you're standing back 20 feet away, you may not be able to see the building, you might see the roof, but it'd be pretty close as to whether you can see the windows.
The closer you would be, so the current proposal with the wall where we're proposing it, the closer you'd be to the wall, the harder it would be to see.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
You might do some calculations on that.
Okay.
And also this grass area here in the back. I don't know. I don't see any contours on there, but maybe that area is 30 feet wide. If a parking space is 20 feet deep, it looks like it might be 30 or 35 feet wide.
I think that green space area is 45 feet.
Okay, 45 feet. You could potentially do like some 4-to-1 berming in there and get that elevation of that ground up. I know that might mess with your sidewalk, but then you're planting some trees, you know, that might be 12 foot tall when planted, and you're raising their base height up, 3 feet or so. So that helps some more with the sight lines.
Okay, we'll look at that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time this evening.
Since there are no other questions or comments, then I'll call for a motion on item D3 regarding ZC 2021-01.
I move that we D3 ZC 2021-1 for approval.
I'll second. Go ahead.
A motion to approve from Gregory and a second by Wendy. Any discussion?
The only thing that concerns me is maybe the parking isn't enough. If he says 55% of them have 2 cars and 45% have 1, I think that comes up to more than 83 spots. But that's one thing that I think that needs to be looked at a little more.
Any other questions, comments? Thanks, Don. I didn't do the math on the parking. I just took their word for it. I like the product type. It seems I don't think I've ever seen a public hearing where 6 people got up and spoke like they'd already bought one of the things. But I can see how it's going to be in high demand, and we have an aging demographic, and anyway, I think they have over-provided in their landscaped area, which will mature to a point that I don't think you'll be able to grow grass under those trees. Those are my thoughts on it. So. Any other comments, discussion? All right, Chad will take the vote screen. Motion to approve passes 6-0. Clayton, this will go to City Council when? June 14th. There will be another public hearing at City Council June 14th when council will take action.